believing in somebody is huge. You've got to believe in somebody. And I believe in everybody. There's not anybody that I haven't had belief in that they couldn't do it. At the end of the day, if they didn't make it, it was their choice. Not that they didn't, I believed in them, but they chose perhaps not to continue.
Today, this is a really special episode for myself. Today, I have my first guest, and this guest is somebody who is extremely special to me. It was that one person who believed in me like no one else did, and it allowed me to go from where I was to quite frankly, where I am today. So today, I'm extremely grateful and honoured to be sitting down with one of the mentors that I've always had as a young person, and as somebody who I've always aspired to look up to and role model growing up as a young person. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast my previous sports development officer, who is now retired swimming coach, Mark Howell.
Thank you very much, Luke. Thank you for that. Yes, I remember it well, shall we say, you starting, because it was actually, I think it was either my first or second time doing that leadership course. So, as well as you guys, I grew up learning off you guys as well. And I learned an awful lot from I think it was a big group actually. It was about 10 of you in that group. All very good sportsmen, as I remember. And I still got contact with most of them. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience for me, to be honest with you, because I was new to it. Yes, I'd worked through leadership skills and I was a coach, but you can always learn something somewhere from somebody. And I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody or gone anywhere where I haven't thought, yeah, that's a good idea.
So we were kind of the second group of young people who'd work with. So reflecting before you had the experiences to work with more young people on a leadership basis, like we did myself and other young people, what was you doing before you got involved in that sports development role?
Well, I've always been, my background is I was a civil servant, and I've always dealt with people. That's been the enjoyment that I've had. I'm no desk jockey. I couldn't sit behind a computer every day. That would just sort of completely destroy me. So I've always worked with people. And going back to my days when I first started work, at the age that you were, Luke, when I finished school at A-levels, and I started with the Benefits Agency in Ebbw Vale, actually. And it was, as a young lad, growing up, I learnt so much because I was having to deal with people that were desperate. Some of them were desperate, some of them were violent. There was rapists, murderers, and at a young age, although I was mentored by some very good people, I was having to deal with those type of people. And I learned an awful lot about interpersonal skills, and I think that's where the world is missing a trick at the moment. People don't know how to talk to each other. We've got technology, but we don't use the speech and the body language that basically humans were brought up to use. We use text, which I'm not the best at, to be honest with you, but as I said, I'm not a desk jockey. So I learned a lot from talking to people, as I'm talking to you now, opposite. People that were, one minute I could be interviewing somebody that was totally desperate, didn't have no money, trying to sort that out. The next minute I could be interviewing some old lady or old gentleman that couldn't afford to bury their husband or wife. So you were pulled in all directions, but you learned fast. From there, I've always been out on the roads talking to people, dealing with their claims and treating people as individuals. I think that's very important. How you talk to somebody and how you treat them, and you do what you say you're going to do, basically. You can take the sting out of any occasion by just the way you talk to somebody. If you're going to talk to them on their level, sometimes if they're not very happy, the conversation is going to go down. And that's where I learned a lot of my skills, to be honest with you, which were carried forward, as you know, later on into sport, into sports coaching, and doing the sports leaders.
Amazing. And you talked about technology and how people from a younger generation, use technology more than the interpersonal skills that we perhaps were meant to be or should have been brought up using. How do you think, because I see often many people talking about technology, and a lot of people describe technology as being something that it's fight or flight. You know, we can either try and fight it or we can adapt to it and move on with it. You know, how do you think that affects a young person growing up with technology?
I think it's probably a big downer, to be honest with you, because there's no control over it. And there can never be any control over it because you're surrounded by it. Now, if you could... it's not basically used for what it was intended. If you look at just Facebook, it's a marvelous tool. It's a marvelous communication tool, but it's never used for that. It's used for hanging your dirty washing out on occasions, and with young people, that's going to go downhill fast. So although it's got its benefits, and perhaps I'm wrong in decrying it all, it does act as very stressful to me and anxious because, one, I'm not the best typist, but two, the information coming through on it, as we know from bullying and things like that, and there can never be any control on it. It is out of control now. You see it in the news with the various things that have happened with Facebook and Twitter and people like that. Marvellous, but I think as humans, we ain't got no control over it, to be honest with you.
And I completely agree with that. And I think, when I speak to young people in particular, I do tell them that at some part you have to be accountable in regards to what you see and what you interact with. And young people have to make a decision that they are in control of what they choose to see and what they choose to view through social media. Yeah. Take an app like Instagram, for example. You have to follow somebody to see it through social media. So I tell young people that they have to become accountable for the people who they follow. Yeah. If somebody makes you feel bad or doesn't add value to you or makes you feel anxious or upset, then you have the right to just simply unfollow them or even to block them, so you remove that anxious thought. And so for me personally, I like to surround myself with positive people, as you know. But most important for me is when I'm on social media, all I'm getting is positive vibes. Yeah. So I only follow people who add value to me or make me feel better about myself, because that then allows me to, yes, I'm only on my phone for 10, 15 seconds time I scroll through my top few photos, but that top 10, 15 seconds of my time will then transfer to how I feel for the rest of 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. So if I leave my phone on a negative vibe, then I'm more likely to feel negative when I get off my phone. So it's important that I'm constantly surrounding myself with positivity. And I think that's something that young people don't quite understand.
No, they don't. And I think, as far as going back to what I've just said about sort of being brought up with talking to people, I learnt positive from negative doing that. So I could deal with technology later on, but now they've just been introduced to technology and the actual physical communication has gone. And I think they're unable to distinguish between, I can't do that because I'm talking to that person, he's in front of me and he's going to throw wobbly. Whereas now you can put that on Facebook, walk away from it, and the consequences are huge. But you don't know what those consequences are, because that person will be totally devastated. And so I certainly think you've got to learn the basics before you go through to use the finer things then, shall we say.
I understand that, and it's something that obviously we can all understand and learn those basic things and advance at different levels, because we all advance at different levels, as you know. Yeah. So going back to kind of your story, and you talked then about kind of that transition you made from going from a civil servant and working with people in different areas to working on a more practical basis with young people in particular. Why did you choose to make that transition?
Because my thoughts on all of this, and it's coming from a sports angle, there are thousands of good athletes, thousands of good people out there, but there are very few good leaders, good coaches. And I wanted to make a difference by putting my skills that I'd learned over basically 30 to 40 years as a civil servant into that. I thought I had something that I could give people like yourselves, a bit of, the mistakes I made, then perhaps I could put over in stories, and those people wouldn't make those mistakes. And I've always been of the opinion that we've got a group of people. People just work with a group instead as individuals, and that's something I learned an awful lot about. Everybody to me is an individual, and that means giving up my time to work with that individual. Not just a group of people where I'm going to throw out commands and they do as I say. I wanted to make a difference in that way. I wanted people to question, well, why did you ask me to do that? And it all appealed to me, to be honest with you, And when you start doing it, it's a huge buzz to know that people are listening to what you're saying and are becoming better people for it. I'm not perfect by no means. I mean, I made some hell of it mistakes, but but people have learned from what I've learned, basically. And I made that transition because I enjoyed it. And I think, I gave a lot to people that perhaps would have gone down the wrong road on occasions.
Yeah, no, you certainly did. And when he was making that transition, using a sporting terminology, did you have to overcome any hurdles when he was making that transition?
Oh, lots of them. Certainly with swimming, and probably get shot for saying this, but very tunneled vision. Don't look outside the box. And I'm not just talking about swimming. When I first started in sport, nobody looked outside that box. Now, for leadership skills, coaching skills, you've got to look outside the box. You've got to look at what other people do and perhaps either use those ideas or adapt those ideas to your own project, whatever you were actually doing. And I think that's another problem. People don't look, it's, I've done this and that's what works. Well, not necessarily. I think you've got to sort of work with people, and I found a lot of hurdles there that people didn't want to know. And I'd go to many coaching meetings and I'd mention perhaps bringing something in from athletics, from rugby, from football. And they'd look at me as if I had horns. What's this idiot on about, basically? And then gradually, as time went by, you'd think, where did they get that from? I wonder. They would start to think about what you'd said, and you'd get various other coaches bringing in that. I think, I coached at sort of like small community clubs at roots level. But you see some of these ideas now being used at elite level. It's come through. I'm not saying I said it, but but the hurdles that you had to cross at that point were because people are so ignorant to it. They just believe it was authoritarian. That's my session, or that's what I'm telling you, and you will do that. And I think you see a lot of that. And I think you've got to appreciate when I was doing it, like yourself, people when they start in primary school are told what to do. They led more than people like yourself. As you got older, you've got to let go of the reins and let people make their own mistakes and work with that person because they're getting older. They're not the little Johnny that you once knew that you had to tell what to do. Those hurdles, because teachers would look at me and say, well, you can't do that. They need to be chastised or told off. Yeah. And I just think, no, you work with that person.
I think it's a great philosophy with that is that kind of the push and pull. You can only push somebody so far to do something. There comes a point where they have to take responsibility for that, have to pull it themselves, because if you continue to push somebody and then by the time you give them the responsibility to pull it, then they're so used and their habits are telling them that, well, hang on a minute, now there's nobody pushing me. I no longer have the motivation or the belief that I can do something. So I completely agree with that philosophy of only giving a young person so much until they have to take personal responsibility and accountability to pull it themselves and pull their own way forward. And I particularly love that thought process of not just swimmers in particular, but so many people put themselves in boxes. They believe they're not good enough, so I'm going to put myself in this box and I'm going to be trapped in this box forever. Why do you think people have that idea and that mindset of that maybe they limit themselves or they put themselves in boxes and they have that tunnel vision rather than looking at the bigger picture?
I think probably there's two ways I'd answer that. One is that it's worked for them to a certain extent, although they don't really look at the wider picture to see what happened to that person after. So it's worked. And the other way is that people will naturally look for the easy way out. If you start opening boxes, you will open more work for yourself, basically. You have to do more because you have to work with different boxes. And I think it's far easier. And especially perhaps if you're not paid, if you're a volunteer, you're just there as a parent, whatever, but you do tend to look for the easy option. Whereas what I've just said about opening the windows a bit, you've got to sort of basically fly in different directions. And I think the two answers there, one is easier because it's that's what I did, so that works, because it worked with me, not necessarily. And the other one is it is probably easier because you are generating work for yourself.
Okay, so thinking about somebody who listening to this podcast now or may think and may be able to resonate and think, well, perhaps I am putting myself in a box like you've just described there so amazingly. what would be your advice be to somebody who's looking to widen their vision, or looking to go outside of that box?
What I would say to them is, right, this is what your box is, but what would tie in a network with that box? There's many other boxes out there. Now go and have a look. Go and knock on somebody's door. Find people that know people and network so that you can learn different things from it. I mean, like I'll take sport. If it's rugby, okay, rugby's your general sport. What about looking at American football? What about finding somebody that knows about it? Athletics. So that you can find people that will feed in. And I'm talking sport because that's what I've always used, but it can happen with anything. You know, if you can be a geography professor, we'll go and find people that do other things that can help you to just generate more knowledge.
Definitely. It's that questioning, isn't it? You know, you have to ask yourself questions to be able to move forward. And unless you're asking yourself questions, you know, where am I at now? Why am I doing this? And where do I want to go? Then, unless you ask yourself those questions, then you're always going to find yourself in the box. And going back to my story, kind of when I first met yourself in Brown Comprehensive School, in year 10, I believe.
Year 10,
when I first came to you for my first sports leader session, I'll be honest, I was probably in a box like you've just described. You know, I was very comfortable in my own environment, so I was happy doing what I was doing. But I always remember the first time we met was when you came into the sports hall, and we had a gymnastics lesson, and you come in and talked about sports leaders, and if you want to do sports leaders, stand up and go into the dance studio or the girls' gym back in those days. And I always remember my instant thought was, well, anything to get out of gymnastics, because I couldn't do a forward roll to save my life. So anything to get out of gymnastics, I'll go and do the sports leaders qualification. But what can you first remember of kind of that first interaction, our first few sessions of doing that sports leadership qualification together?
Well, at that time, I was thinking, heavens, look at all these, because there was quite a few who joined, and I'm thinking, well, I've only done, I think I'd done the one course the year before, and there was many more of you, and I thought, right, okay. It's a challenge, but I needed to treat everybody as an individual, and I'll come back that time after time, basically. So my first impressions was, oh heavens, am I going to sort this little lot out now? So you were my best group, I'll be quite honest with you. The year before, it was a bit of a trial and error, and there were some good people came out of that. But you guys, there was so much there, and so much talent, not only sport-wise, but people-wise, personalities. There was some real good personalities, and that's another thing that came out to me. There were some characters in there as well. Not perhaps characters that you'd sort of associate with leadership, but as they went through it, their leadership qualities came out. And because they'd been there, seen it, and worn the T-shirt or some things, they perhaps came up with solutions to problems that I would never have thought of. And that's what I really enjoyed about it as we moved through the course. But my first impressions were, heavens, look at all this lot. What am I going to do with these now then? You know, and I could see some of you. And I'm thinking, because there was very good sportsmen there, and there was also people that had been much trouble in school. And a couple of teachers saying, well, do you really want him, or do you really want her? And after the session, when we took you all on board, there was one or two of the teachers who you probably will know. Said, aren't you sure you're going to take them on? I said, yeah, it's a challenge. It's good. It's good in everybody. Let's go for it. You know, so that was my first impressions.
Awesome.
And I wasn't let down. But I'll come to one story. As we moved through that course and we all started to learn the leadership skills and what was expected of us. And I think the best part of it is when you actually do it yourself, when you're actually put out there and you've got to do it. I can tell you, I can teach you, I can show you, but when you're left with it. And there was there were two characters actually. It took on, I think it was some of the more challenging children it was either, I think it was gymnastics it was, in the hall. And I remember one of them coming back to me, would trouble himself and saying, sir, they swore at me. I said, yes, welcome to our world. What did you do about it? Well, I told them off. And what was you doing the other day? I swore at the teacher. I said, well, now you know what it feels like. So perhaps you will adjust your behaviour. And that made that person, you will know who he is. I won't mention names, but he's grown up to be quite a good lad. I think you're probably still in contact with him. But I always remember that because he had been in trouble quite a few occasions for doing things that you shouldn't, perhaps, we say.
Of course, and it's that case of that sometimes you have to be put in perspective. You have to have your perspectives put in front of you to understand actually what you're doing in your actions. And one of the biggest takeaways I had from the sports leadership qualification that I did with the group of people that we surround ourselves with was the fact that it was amazing just to see new ideas, new perspectives, but really challenge ourselves for what people we were. I think, a lot of us, like you said, we were good sportsmen, but outside of sports, potentially some of us, like myself, struggled in the classroom. And I was able to, through that entire year of doing sports leaders, I was able to make that transition. I was always not the brightest in regards to academically. However, I always thought I was a good leader, or thought I was a good sports person. So what that leadership qualification allowed me to do in particular was to join the dots with my education. So I started to understand the understanding of sacrifice, having to be resilient, work around things, and realise that you're always going to have obstacles in front of you.
Yeah.
You have two options when you have an obstacle in front of you. You can either continue doing what you've always done and you'll keep getting the same results, or you can go down the path less travelled and do what works for you. And I really believe that because of the sports leaders qualification, it allowed me to rebuild my confidence in a way that little else did. And I'll always remember, because there was a bit of difficulty getting me to school, first of all, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And I remember my first sports session, or my first after school club, was in a Welsh school.
That's right. That's called Gymraeg Brohelig.
That's it. And I remember going to that first school so nervous. And I was so anxious, thinking, do I really want to be doing this? Because I remember having a bad day in school that day, but what got me through that day was the fact that I was able to go and coach and then potentially to do what I enjoyed doing. Yeah. And leaving that session in particular feeling amazing, I realised that by helping others, it's actually helped myself, and just being able to facilitate young people not playing sport, but just having a pure enjoyment. Yeah. It was the most amazing feeling ever. Yeah. And, I think that's one of the most important memories that I'll always keep, because it was that very first time I'd actually engaged with a group of young people, and seeing the value that I had in them must replicate kind of the value that you had and the feelings that you had personally when you worked with us. Yeah, almost certainly. And I going back to that little story, I remember you coming back and you'd learned a bit of Welsh as well, more than you'd actually learned in school, which gave you the lessons. That was it. But because you were working in that environment, you picked it up, and I do remember, like I said, you struggled with attending school for a long time, but gradually as you went through it, your attendance got better, you got more confident. And there was never any looking back after that. There was about 4, I think they were all really good, but there was 4 of you, and you know who they are, that came out of that with your heads held high, a lot more confidence, and really sort of stood tall in there, basically. And that, to me, was worth more than any Olympic gold medal, just to see you guys going from, especially yourself, Luke, where you struggled a little bit, like you said, massively, with anxiety and all the issues that you were having. But when you moved into Brohelig, the Welsh school, you were then having to forget you were little bits of problems and sort somebody else's out. And those kids got a lot of problems. You sort of tend to think, right, this should be an easy session. No, something happens. And they did have a few issues down there, and with various things that were going on, which I didn't tell you at the time, because I thought, well, you'll deal with it, will you worry about it otherwise? And, you went on from there. And I never, ever thought I'd see you get on a stage. As you know, one of the biggest problems with sports leaders or doing the leadership program is getting people to talk to people, to stand on a stage. And I never thought I'd see that happen with you when we first began. But, there was never any looking back, was there? And for me personally, that leadership qualification in year 10 was, in my opinion, was last chance saloon. It was the last chance. It was the last opportunity I had to get my life back on track, because, and if I didn't have that qualification, then God knows where I'd be at this moment in time, if I'd even be here. Yeah. But it was a last chance saloon, and I think I really did take the chance with both hands and push on. But like you said, in regards to seeing me on a stage, I'll always remember the first time. It was, if I remember correctly, it was open evening. So I had my suit on, had my script written for me, and my story, and it was only like 2 pages of A4. And I remember standing up in front of the whole of open evening and sharing my story. And you were videoed it, and I've still got that video on DVD in my record of achievement folder in the house now. Yeah. And sometimes I'll still look back and think, well, that's where it all started. And I'll be honest, I'm not afraid of sharing that. I was so nervous for that talk, because people who know me will know that I suffer with a bit of dyslexia sometimes in regards to that. I struggle reading, and writing. You know, I'm great at speaking, but reading and writing has always been a downfall for me. So for me, reading that 2 sides of A4 in front of, you know, maybe 500 people or plus that, you know, was so nervous. And I remember just sitting there looking at the whole audience thinking, what on earth have I signed up for? Like, why did I say yes to this one opportunity? Yeah. This perhaps should have been the opportunity that I eventually and firstly said no to.
Yeah.
But I remember getting off that stage, having that pure adrenaline rush, and thought, well, you know what, if I can do this
that's
in front of all these peers and all these young people, then perhaps I can take this a next step further.
Yeah. It was, to me, it came home to me when you guys started doing that. When you went to Sport Wales and you stood up on that stage in front of some of those people. And one of the stories I remember was a young girl from Ebbw Vale as well, who sort of basically grew up with you in that programme. And she started out, she said to me, Mark, she said, I'm only here because I don't like doing PE. And it really came home because that day we did the Ambassadors Conference in Cardiff Stadium, was the year before the Olympics. Yeah. You were there, April was there, and there were 1 or 2 others there as well. You got up in front of all these dignitaries, because half the Olympic Committee were down there that day, and gave you a speech. And April got up in front of Lord Coe and everybody and gave her journey, and I thought, marvellous. You know, it came home for me that day, that these were people that, like yourself, like April, lots of stories. Why am I doing this? Always to get out and doing something. And now you were delivering speeches, and I was nervous. I mean, I wasn't even delivering the speech, and I stood at the back thinking, heavens, I would hate to do this. I didn't admit it at the time to any of you, but I'd have struggled with that, and that was brilliant. That was just better than any good gold medal anybody could win, to be honest with you. A young girl in Bryn Mawr, again, she was really off the wall at the time, lots of problems, and the school actually said to me, Mark, you really sure you want to do this? And I thought, well, why not? You know, everybody's got a good point in them. Everybody's good. It's just looking for it and working with them and having patience. So I took her on, basically. And yes, okay, her language was a bit colourful, to say the least. But we worked through the course. And so cometh the day, cometh the person. We had to decide where we were going to put her to volunteer. So I thought, head on the block here, Mark. I don't know what this is going to go. So I took 2 of her friends anyway. Now, bear in mind, this young girl had severe problems. She'd self-harmed. She'd done a lot of bad things, and really was a firecracker. You didn't know which way she was going to go. So we put our heads on the block, and we put her in a local primary school with charges, basically. Yeah. We give her a young class, and I took a deep breath and hoped I didn't get a phone call, because I put 2 of the other leaders with her so that, you know, there would be support for her. And again, she never looked back. She went on to she became part of St. John's Ambulance. Perhaps not. She didn't take it as far as a lot you guys did, but she became a very well thought of person in the community. And I say very well because unfortunately she passed away recently. But the amount of people who were at her funeral saying how wonderful she was, how she did this, how she did that. And it came from a little bit of patience, a little bit of, it's going to go wrong, but what can we do to sort it out?
And I think, you know, what's a huge credit to yourself is it also takes that little bit of belief, and just that one person believing in you. Like I'm sure myself and many other people, especially Lauren in particular, is the case of that. Sometimes they're so used to being passed from person to person, being told they're not good enough, being told they can't do something, and often being criticised for what they're bad at. It just takes that one person to instill that little bit of belief, to tell you that you are good enough, you can do it. And when you see that in somebody, when somebody gives you that energy and belief, and actually tells you that, you know what, you are good enough, you can do it. Yes, you may not have the best of starts, but you can start now, make a brand new ending. And just that little bit of belief can help push somebody much further than they originally thought they could go. And in particular to her story, it's a case of that we all, you know, we're all successful just for graduating the course, but most importantly, changing our lives for the better. And it doesn't matter about how far you go in your journey or what you end up doing. All that really matters, and it's something that I've picked up from myself a lot, is all that matters is that the person that you are when you leave the qualification. It doesn't matter the awards you get, the places you get to go, the places you get to see. What really matters is the type of person you are when you leave.
That's right. I sort of basically work on the belief everybody is an open book. Some people, obviously, when you're born, the book is empty, you get the chapters written. Well, sometimes you get some bad chapters, so you got to go back and rip them out and start again. But generally, when you finish that book, that person is a proper human being and, you know, part of society then, basically. That's how I see it in a simplistic term, and that's how I explain it. We're all empty books. Like I said, we have a few bad chapters, all of us. We get them thrown back out or rewrite them and off to go again, to be honest with you. But believing in somebody is huge. You know, you've got to believe in somebody. And I believe in everybody. There's not anybody that I haven't had belief in that they couldn't do it. At the end of the day, if they didn't make it, it was their choice. Not that they didn't, I believed in them, but they chose perhaps not to continue the course or to take different lines. But I think everybody came out of it with, you know, back on the path, having some sort of experience and of leadership, and will take it into their lives.
And I completely agree with that. And like for myself, if it wasn't for that initial leadership qualification, I wouldn't have had the aspiration, the belief to push on and to go higher heights and do other opportunities and have that domino effect that's pretty much happened in my life at the minute. But obviously, talk about how important it is in regards to have that belief and to have that open book mindset in a young person, especially in school inside the education system. Why do you think it's important for young people to be exposed to these leadership or opportunities that you have kindly provided young people as in your journeys? But why do you think it's important for young people to be exposed to that development process at a young age?
I think, going back to what I sort of briefly touched on earlier, is we can teach you, we can say what's in the textbook, we can give you our experience of it. But I think at the end of the day, the best way to learn is in that situation. And as long as you're well supported and well mentored, and there's somebody there that you can say, I can't handle this, can you take over? And that's down to teamwork. Even, you know, myself, I look for somebody now and again. It's normally Sharon. How do I get myself out of this? You know, but I think the best way to learn is in a real situation, not out of a textbook. And I think that's another problem with perhaps leadership. Everybody goes with the book. And we had this conversation a while back. What about coaching? What about doing it from the gut? You know, it says that in the book, but that might not suit that situation. And this is where I think putting young people into that situation, they can't suddenly go to me, well, it says this in the book, why would we do that? You've got to adapt. You've got to move with the times, you know, move with what you feel. If you make a wrong decision, okay, tick it off, push it behind you, learn from it. We're never going to make the right turn every time. But again, coming back to what you say, you will learn from, oh heck, I've made a mess of this. And I do it myself. I often think on the side of the pool, that wasn't a good idea, Mark, but I've learned from it, I won't do it again. And when things are going, like I said, you will have your scenarios in a book. You'll have your scenarios that the teacher sets up for you, or the leadership body camp. But in a real situation, you've got real outcomes. And you have to feel for the situation. And I think a young person will feel for that situation, doing it in real terms. So to me, that is huge.
So you talk then about being this open book, and sometimes it's reading a book and thinking that we have to follow this exact chapter, we have to follow this specific idea of how to change or fix something. What would your advice be to maybe a coach who has a problem in their sports club at the minute, or just somebody who has a problem in their life and they want to change it, and the book tells them to do one thing, but their gut and their instinct tells them to do another way to benefit the people of that session? What would your advice be to somebody who's looking to not follow the book and follow the instinct?
Go for it. As long as if it's something that could seriously affect people, seek advice as well. If it's something that is reasonably simple to fix, go with your gut. Because if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. And if it works, who knows? If it's something a little bit more serious, pass it by somebody else first. Look at what the book says, how you feel, and then pass it by somebody else, somebody that you trust to give you, good feedback on whatever. Or a couple of people. And then make a decision from that. Don't necessarily believe what it says in the book. And I think that's what's wrong with a lot of society today. We follow the book, which is basically written around certain scenarios. Whereas for my purpose, I would always, bear the book in mind. And sometimes you've got to go with the book. But I'd also think, I got a feeling about this. If you make a mistake, as long as it's not something that's going to seriously affect you or somebody else, you just got yourself to blame for it. I've done a few of that. If it's going to be a serious one, if it's going to be repercussions and you need, then seek advice from as many people as you can.
Well, so what would be your top principles of coaching or leadership if you was to share your knowledge with up-and-coming coaches or coaches who wish to be like you, for example? What would be your top principles you would tell them?
Trust. Trust is huge. Enthusiasm is huge. And honesty is huge. Don't try to... I'll refrain from saying something I shouldn't. Okay. Don't try to baffle them.
Yeah.
Say it as it is. Truth always comes out anyway. So honesty would be a big one. Trust is another thing. If you say you're going to do it, then do it. Don't, I'll promise you this, I'll promise you that, knowing full well you can't come up with the goods. If you're going to promise somebody, you do it. And don't be afraid to roll your sleeves up and help somebody out. You may be the leader, but you're not Teflon. Get on the shop floor and help people out, basically. So, honesty, trust, and enthusiasm. If you're not enthusiastic for it, if you've got half a doubt in your mind, then don't do it. And that, I would say, transfer to your leadership as well. Find out what people like. Because if you're pushing buttons that they like being pushed, they'll do it. And they're happy to do it. But if you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, it ain't going to work. Sometimes a little bit, perhaps, just to make people appreciate the better things. But again, you've got to work with that person. That would be my sort of 3 basics: trust, honesty, and enthusiasm.
But I think it's important that you do remember those basics, because when I work with people in coaching and leadership, so many people try to overcomplicate it. Mm-hmm. They try to fix the top end before they try to fix the bottom end for the most simple things. And my biggest bit of advice to any coaches out there listening is a case of sometimes you really have to start small, and the smallest of changes will make the biggest of differences. And so many people try and fix a huge problem by taking massive action, where sometimes you just have to take that little bit of action and have that huge amount of belief that it's going to work. But most importantly, kind of visualizing how it's going to work, telling yourself it is going to work, so you're believing in what you're doing. Yeah. So when people can see you doing and taking action, they're believing in what you're doing because they can see the results that you're visualizing and where it's going to get them. And for me, I think that's so important when it comes to coaching, just the smallest changes. For example, one of the sports I'm rubbish at is golf. I'm absolutely awful. I went to play. I was in Swansea the other week, and we were playing it was like a 4D golf kind of thing, a golf simulator. And there's quite a few of us playing. We had a great time playing golf on this, indoor visualator, and it was awesome. And out of everyone playing golf that day, it only had to be me that swung the golf club too hard and put the golf club through the roof. I was awful, and I asked the guy there for a bit of advice, and I said, look, what's wrong with my swing? Why am I so terrible? Why can't I hit the ball straight? And he said, all I want to do is the smallest thing. And I said, okay, what have I got to change? And he said, I just want you to rotate the club 20 degrees, ever so slightly. But I'm like, did you just see that ball? It went 90 degrees right. I surely need to change more than just this, than just changing my hand grip, or just changing it to 20 degrees slightly. And this guy went, just trust me, just make the smallest of change. And I'm like, well, come on then, let's see what it's going to be like. I'm just going to hit it sideways again. And then, anyway, long story short, I rotated the club 20 degrees. I took a swing at it, and I went dead straight. And I was gobsmacked. I'm like, how on earth? And he said, well, it's simple. He said, sometimes the smallest changes in life will make the biggest difference. That's right. Yeah, totally. And for me, it was a case of, okay, well, perhaps I'm not as bad as I thought. Yeah. A couple of swings later, the golf club went through the roof, like I said. So I wasn't quite all there. Yeah. But that taught me kind of sometimes when it comes to coaching, and that person was coaching me then, you just have to do the smallest of changes, and it can make the biggest of differences.
Yeah, I totally agree. And life is the same. Life is the same if you come away from the sport. And I always remember, like I said, I'm a big one from learning from other people as well. And you remember this, I use it quite a lot in leadership, the KISS, KISS. And I think that sums up an awful lot of things. And I pinched that off somebody, as you know, that's not something I made up. Keep it simple, stupid. And I think that will sum it all up. And life, sport, whatever you do, if you overcomplicate it, it's going to get more muddier as we go through it. So I totally agree with you.
So you're currently coaching, we talked about earlier, you're currently coaching swimming at your local swimming club in Tredegar.
Yeah.
I've had the honour of kind of working with you in your swimming club quite recently in regards to finding out about your philosophy of coaching and how you develop your young, not just young athletes, but your young people into great leaders and great people rather than just great swimmers. It'd be great if we can find out a little bit more about that.
Right. Now, I came into swimming about 20 years ago now, I expect it was. And I came from rugby and athletics, which I sort of continued to meddle around with. But I've always believed that not everybody is going to be a world champion. Not everybody is going to be an elite. There has to be something else. And when they leave a sport, they should leave it not only with good memories and good skills and experience, but with something to go with it as well. And that's the way we've developed the club. We've had good swimmers. We've had those swimmers that have gone quite the way up. But they've also left the club with qualifications, with, I believe in the whole athlete, not just the physical side, the mental side, the nutritional side. So we bring in people, as you know, to deal with all sorts of things, sports psychologists, nutritionalists, so that when they leave the club, they will have a vast idea of a lot of subjects then, basically. So the way we run the club is some people will go on to do better things, but they'll still have what the everything else that we do in the club. It's a good social. We do the team bonding exercises, not taking people off to do team bonding, but we'll book a local climbing club or something like that, or we'll take them on a trip. Well, that is what is happening. So they become a team. So although it's an individual sport as well, they all brought up to deal with people and to get on together. So as well as being good athletes, they've got knowledge and they've got the ability to, they might not always like each other, but they'll get on with each other and they will help each other. And if there's a problem, they'll stand back to back and help each other out, So if this is somebody having a problem, then they'll get round them, in all fairness to them. So things like, they recognise things like bullying in school and things like that. So they will identify that and take the skills that they've learned in the club to actually say to somebody, well, that person there is not happy. We're just trying to make you a little bit aware about it. And they'll identify things as well, shall we say as well. Just
to make it clear for the people listening, is that you all do this on a voluntary basis?
Yeah, there's no payment whatsoever. The only ones that get paid are those that do the lessons on a Saturday morning through the leisure centre, but they are now employed to obtain those qualifications that they got, because it's quite expensive, put up to level 1 and level 2. They'll do voluntary work for us, and then we don't want to give them cash. We want to give them something that is going to benefit them. So we will pay for their courses, their level 1, level 2 swimming, but they are the only ones. Nobody gets paid.
So, as a volunteer, as many people listening probably volunteer right now, and people who haven't volunteered, I do highly encourage you to go out and experience it, because it's an amazing feeling when you give your time out for little return, but the return you get is that value. So, obviously, you've been swimming now for 20 plus years, if I'm correct?
Yeah, 22.
So, as a volunteer, what makes you keep on wanting to go back and give your time to these young people?
I just love it. I just love the way that you can take the rough edges of people and turn them into, it's going from the ugly duckling to the swan then, basically. I suppose that's the best way to say it. And I've had part of that. I put my 10 penneth in. It's not just us at the club or me, but I've had a little bit of that. And that, as I said earlier on, is worse than any medal, which is perhaps a bit materialistic and is forgotten. If you take all the people that won there, they've forgotten after a couple of months. This is not forgotten. This is something that travels with them in life through their skills. I like to finish every interview by asking my guest their quick five questions. Now, these are quick fire questions that just the first things that come to mind. They're really easy, but most importantly, just allows us to summarize your thoughts on this incredible interview. And I'm so grateful for your time. So we'll start off with... You realise I'm a reflectionist, so this is going to be my worst nightmare. But no problem at all. There's no rush. These are just 5 quick fire questions. So the first one is, what are you grateful for? Grateful for given the opportunity to volunteer. I didn't go into it. I didn't realise I was going into it. It was because my daughter started, basically. But I thought, what am I letting myself in for? But I'm forever grateful for that happening, for those 20 years of volunteering. I would never change it.
And what is your one bit of advice for somebody who is looking to become a volunteer?
Try it. Do it. We can all look for excuses not to, but yeah, take the bull by the horns and just try it. Pick something you like and really try it.
And what is one thing that you would still like to achieve in your lifetime?
Really, just to see nothing changes, it's going on. You know, I've got no regrets. I've got some marvellous memories, and I don't think I would want anything out of it. You know, okay, we perhaps would have liked a little bit more money, perhaps to put into people's projects, and perhaps even worked in perhaps areas where you had a little bit more opportunity, perhaps. But I wouldn't change anything, to be honest with you. It is what it is, and I've enjoyed it. I'm still enjoying it.
Amazing. And what is the one thing you wish you knew 10 years ago?
For some of the problems that I've had, I wish I'd had foresight to see that was going to happen. Coming back to what I said, foresight's a wonderful thing. Perhaps a little bit more foresight, but I don't think I'd have changed anything, Luke. I've done what I've done. I've enjoyed it, and I've given it 100%. A bit of foresight, perhaps would be and think, why did I do that?
And finally, my last question for you: what does believing in yourself mean to you?
It means confidence, again, coming back, honesty, enthusiasm, and all the things that go with leadership. That's what believing in myself. If I used all those little subtitles, that is what feeds back into me thinking, yeah, I believe in myself. I do those things.
But before we close this interview, I would just like to take some time to acknowledge you and thank you, first of all, for
Pleasure.
your time. But most importantly, to thank you for the incredible human that you are. You know, the amount of people, and especially young people's lives, you've helped change and shape for the better. We've talked about some of the stories of how you've helped other people, not just my own, but other people. And I know you've helped hundreds of people across Wales. And not just from me, but from everyone else you've helped. I just want to thank you ever so much. And you're the type of person that I've always dreamt and always wanted to become and follow and role model. And I think that is just a testament to your leadership skills, but most importantly, your testament to helping young people. And you've completely dedicated your life to helping others to come and to become better versions of themselves. So not just from me, but I'd like to thank you for everything you've ever done for myself personally, but also for every other young person that you've managed to work with. And I truly do feel grateful to have worked with you and had the pleasure of getting to know you across these years. And thank you so much for taking the time out to be my very first guest on the Believe in Yourself podcast. But from me, Luke Rees, Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure for myself, Luke. I've enjoyed every minute, and you know what they say, it's the journey, not the destination. So we're still traveling. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed it as much as probably you guys have got stuff out of it, you know, to be honest with you.
I hope you all enjoyed episode number 2 of the Believe in Yourself podcast. This was a really special episode for me, being able to sit down with one of the people who very first believed in me and gave me my first opportunity to change was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful to have someone incredible like Mark in my life right now. It really would mean the world to me if you could give this podcast a rating, a like, and leave a comment on how it's helped you. Please also remember to hit the subscribe button and to share the podcast with people who needs to hear some of the incredible messages that Mark talked about in this episode. I cannot wait to bring on our next guest to share with you their incredibly inspiring and empowering story of how they was able to overcome the unachievable to live the life that they dreamt of. But please do remember to like, rate and review this podcast to make sure other people are able to hear these incredibly inspiring stories. But from me, Luke Rees, thank you so much for listening to episode number 2 of the Believe in Yourself podcast. But now it's time to believe in yourself to unlock your own potential.